Hello, friends, and welcome to ParapsyPodcast. I'm Isela Madriz. Welcome to this new project where I plan to bring different experts in the field of parapsychology to share with you some of their knowledge, their research, and I want you to pay attention. And if you're interested in this topic, well, you'll love how this podcast would turn out. Today, I have a very special guest. Her name is Nancy Zingrone. So she has this huge CV in parapsychology, psychology, and education. And today, well, we're gonna have a great talk. So welcome, Nancy. How are you doing today?
I'm fine, thank you very much.
Thank you so much for coming and for accepting this invitation. So to get started, I see that well, you had a background. Your first studies were in psychology, education, and history, right?
hmm
So, can you tell us what drew you to parapsychology? What?
I got interested when I was 13, and my mother was needing to drive in from the country to the train station to pick up my father. So, because I was 13, she thought it was okay if I just left the grade school and went over to the library and stayed there until she came to get my dad. And
Okay.
for some weird reason, there was a librarian there who had bought every single thing that anybody from the Rhine group had written. And
Right.
I picked up the books and started reading, and that was the beginning.
And was it? Did you had any experience, like personal experience related to
Uh,
it,
I
like
had
from that time? From that time?
Well, as a child, I used to wake up and see things in the room, but it was always like somebody drew somebody, and it was usually somebody that I had, like my favorite person on television or whatever. And I never thought that that was anything unusual. And when I got older and we moved into the country, I had a couple of times where I woke up in the middle of the night and the bedroom was a log cabin with a ladder, and there were two men walking up the ladder into the top of the whatever was in the cabin. One with what boots, and the other one in buckskins. So one was white, one was native, and I couldn't understand what they were saying, but I could see them walk up, and then I would just kind of fall asleep again, and not worry about it. I didn't go running, but it was weird. But I was interested. And later on, my brother, who did archaeology before he got into psychology, had said to my mother and I that there was some evidence that there had been a cabin on the land where we had our house, and that my room was in that would have been in that cabin, 200 years before or something. So that made me think, well, that's pretty interesting, you know. And then after that was when I started reading these books, and I was just amazed with all of them, and started buying paperbacks and all that kind of stuff from the pharmacy, and just reading everything I could do. And I had an aunt who very kindly, my parents didn't like this, but she's bought me a Ouija board, and I had three friends that we were always wandering around together. We were crazy for the Beatles and all that stuff, and in the same grade school. So we started playing with that, and one of them actually had some apparitional kinds of experiences, sort of one or two one after the other kind of thing. And so then they were asking me more questions, and I was going back to the library to see if I could find books on apparitions and all that kind of stuff. So it really got me into the stuff. And then I'm 18 and I'm going to college, and I decide that I'm an idiot and I'm being gullible, and why am I reading these things? So I got rid of my books. I also got rid of all of my
Oh
my
no.
books of the Beatles.
Oh,
I just I don't do that anymore. It's like, oh my God, why did I do that? And then I got to college. My third college, because my parents, I was the oldest child, so they let me go to two different colleges because I didn't like the first one. And then the third one, I was paying for myself. And I was very lucky because one of the psychology professors, John Bisaha, was very interested in parapsychology and was a member of the Parapsychological Association. And he set up a course, and it was fantastic. I really just fell in love with it and decided, came home and told everybody I was going to be a parapsychologist. And he was also lucky in that later on, Brenda Dunn from the Princeton lab was coming back to college after she got her divorce, and she was one of his students and became a friend of mine. And then later on, after I was out of Chicago, because this was in Chicago, Lloyd Auerbach actually took that course as well. So he had quite an impact on a bunch of us.
me too.
Ah, lovely.
Yeah, Lloyd helped me a lot and introduced me to
Yes,
Ramses, and
he's
yeah,
terrific. Yeah.
the rest is history. So that's great. That's very very interesting. Um, you were the president of the PA for twice, right?
Yes, I
Two
did. We had a
and
Yeah,
mhm.
we had a period where we actually were 2 years president. So I had two of those. So I was actually president for 4 years, I guess. And before that, I was the editor of the newsletter.
And what were the major challenges and achievements that you had during that time of leadership?
I discovered I didn't like to be a leader. That was one thing. But by that time, and because it was in the 2000s. Carlos Alvarado, my late husband, and I were working for the Parapsychology Foundation in New York City, and we actually hosted one of the Parapsychological Association conferences in 2001 in August. And the people that I was working with were people that I had known for a very long time. Some of them were um, older, and I had looked up to them since I was, 25. And then there were people my age, like Mario Varvoglis, who's now running IMI in Paris. Um, so they were really people that I really knew and all that kind of stuff. And I don't believe I think my first one, we had actually had some things that we had to deal with, that were a problem between a couple of members. And again, it was people that I have known forever and people that I admired, and so it was very lucky in that. And then in New York, we didn't really have much of a problem. It was a very well put together conference, which was mainly Lisa Coley and her mother's uh, uh, experiences with conferences. And it was downtown, and there were a lot of foreign folks that came in. A lot of the Brazilians came, and all the Brits and so on. And it was just it was a really nice conference. So I didn't have this outside of trying to figure out how we could have more members, and what were we going to do with our the money in the bank, kind of a thing.
Right.
It was the best part of it was being able to bring in all the memberships that we did in the from the 90s through the early 2000s. We were getting lots of people from Brazil and all over the world, and from Chile, and everywhere. So we felt really excited about that. Initially, when Carlos was a professor, was the president, that group, many of them were older people who had been experimental people. and didn't have very much contact to any of the folks who were not from Europe or were not able to speak English and or speak English like I speak French. I mean Spanish. Um,
Spanish.
yeah, it's like, oh my God. But he was Carlos was the kind of person that everybody knew that he was honest and he was kind and he almost never got angry. And at one point, a huge number of members came in, student members from Brazil, from several places in Brazil, to become members. And some of the older guys were not happy about that. And Carlos and I was not in the room. I was outside of the room with Deborah Delanoy from Edinburgh, and we were just chatting and waiting for him to get out of the meeting so we could all go out to eat. And all of a sudden, his voice raised, and he told them, "I have vetted these people. They are very good people. They are going to be a benefit," so along that kind of thing, at the top of his lungs, which he never did. And I think he just got so frustrated at the in enabling, these people that were nice people, kind people, people who were very good colleagues, to have that kind of idiotic bias.
Right.
And he it just couldn't stand it after that. And it was very, very quiet for a while. And all of us who were standing out there waiting for our various, friends to come out to go
Yeah.
to lunch.
Mm.
Stan Krippner said, "Well, if Carlos says yes, I'm saying yes on every single one of them." And then it was a little bit, and then slowly everybody said, "Yes, okay, okay, yes, well, yes, Carlos, yes, okay." And they all got in, and that was really wonderful. So I thought that was an experience. But that kind of continuous people coming in from other countries and other languages after that, in those early years after that, so like 10 years, 15 years after he was the president, I think that he had a very big influence on how wonderful I think the association is now. It's like it used to be like this rolling Brit Anglo American. That was who the president, and now everybody comes in and has a chance, and I think that was down to him.
Yes, totally. And now it is, well, with Everton, I think
Yeah,
he had a great presidency.
yeah,
And it's interesting because here I've been into the paranormal field and into parapsychology. It's been like 6 years or something, but it was really hard for me to get to know the proper. It's complicated, and the proper places to study, the what information is real and which one is not.
right. That's
Um,
the biggest problem. Yeah, exactly. Because I mean, and it was that way when I was younger too. It was just a blessing that I happened to run into John Bisaha. But you still were, kind of. There were really not a lot. There were more places to go then than there were in this country than there was before, and there certainly wasn't as many programs in South America and so on. So it's I think it's so much better now, even though there's not a whole lot of universities that are ready for you, but there are a lot of individuals that are interested and can get themselves up to a point that they can be a mentor or a professor that's effective for you, that kind of thing. So yeah, it's tough, and many things are exciting enough that you really want them to be real. And when you find out that they're not, it's like, no, poo.
yes, and that is something else that I wanted to talk to you about, which is your research. Um, well, has been a lot of topics, but let's go in order. With your husband, with Carlos, you focused um, on the features of psychological correlates of similar psychic experiences. And what were the most surprising findings from this work?
Well, I think we probably shouldn't have been surprised, but after we did a lot of surveys because they were cheap and we didn't have to ask for a grant, right? And we were when we started doing getting really serious about surveys, we were living in Puerto Rico where Carlos was raised, and he was teaching at one of the, well, it's now Universidad Albizu, I think. It used to be the Carabeño. It's a lovely, very tiny campus in the middle of Old San Juan, and it's a very good school. And he was teaching there, and we wanted to make sure that we were doing the kinds of things we were interested in. He was very much interested in OBEs. He did his master's in that, out of body experiences, and he did his PhD on that as well. And I was interested in near-death experiences, and so was he. And then we were just generally interested in trying to debunk this idea that everyone who says they have a paranormal or a psychical kind of experience, there's something wrong. They need to go to a psychiatrist. They need to be medicated, and that's was just not fitting in with the people that we knew who were having those experiences, especially people who only had maybe one or two in their entire life. So that's how we got started, using Putnam's dissociation experience scale. Later on, we used Tellurian's absorption scale and Claridge's schizotypy. I think we did one with that, but we did a number, and then we had put together a questionnaire of our own that Carlos translated into Spanish, so we could go either way. And we were able to, those were basically demographics and the experiences themselves, and maybe notes from the experiencer about what that experience was, whether it was an apparition or something like a precognitive dream or whatever. So by the time we were at UVA, University of Virginia, in Charlottesville, he had started out there. That was his first job in the U.S. Was working for Dr. Ian Stevenson, and we were there for 7 years in the 2000s, and we realized we had 5, 6, 7 of these surveys that were very similar. So we decided to put them all together and see what was going on. And we realized that if there, when we were younger, there was a big debate about whether you should use people who have experiences for your experiments, or you could just do everybody. And J.B. Rhine, of course, was a populist, and he believed everybody had this sixth sense. And then Chuck Honorton and others were saying, no, you've got to look for people that are showing by the experiences they have spontaneously that they have these kinds of abilities. So we did this thing where we were looking at all of the various psychic things, and the thing that was and then how many of them would you have? Maybe one apparition, or an apparition in a precognitive dream, or maybe a little clairvoyance or whatever. And then we discovered, and I don't know why we were surprised, that the folks who reported that they had auras, that they had aura vision, they had everything. It was like when you, I mean, absolutely everything, and multiple times, and so we ended up writing that article that was published in Australia about if you don't have a lot of money and you can't get a grant, start out with the aura visions of people, because they're going to have everything else. So that was something we were really surprised about, and I don't know why we were, but we were. We thought that was very interesting. And we also noticed with all of those surveys that very seldom did a person actually hit the diagnostic threshold.
Mm-hmm.
They would be higher than the average person in dissociation or absorption or depersonalization or whatever, but it was never very far off normal. And it very, very seldom over that threshold. And if we had more than one person over the threshold, it was like 1% of the population. So we felt like we were right from the beginning on that many people are well adjusted, well adapted to their lives, success in life, and the ESP doesn't didn't mean that there was some problem, some pathological thing that needed to be fixed. So,
And that is something that always calls my attention because, well, now with the clinical parapsychology approach to people, it's most of them are just normal people with, as you said, no pathological signs, and it's difficult for them because they tend to judge themselves and be afraid of sharing, and
mhm.
makes it harder to study the phenomenon. So, well, and
Well,
I'm glad.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, one great example, and I hope she wouldn't be angry for me to say this, but Brenda Dunn had quite a lot of psychic ability, and she did not want it known personally or publicly, because she was running a laboratory and she was a brilliant woman with all kinds of intellectual abilities. So she didn't want to have that known, but she really had these experiences that frequently, and that gave her an edge in a way of how she could talk to people that were coming in to work, take their experimental session or so. She would understand that that this is okay, but it wasn't something that she didn't want to have, kind of, it's one of those things. Like recently I was reading about Sigmund Freud's first sort of association for psychoanalytics, which was called the Wednesday Society, and people would come to his house. And in those years, if you were a woman, it was very difficult to get into any of those kinds of things. In fact, up until the middle of the 20th century, forget about it. And this was, the around 1900. And once he finally relented and allowed Carl Jung to bring in some of his students who were becoming psychoanalysts. They weren't so happy to have the women there, but as it happens, later on, when people started to write, men started writing about that particular society, they would say that the women that were there were not psychoanalysts, they were patients, because how could a woman do that, right? So there's a whole lot of things that happen to the women in the field, and not as much as it used to be, I think, but there's still these kinds of strange biases about what we can do and who we are, and what does that mean to the intellectual work that we happen to be doing. And I think Brenda was right in keeping that quiet. I mean, everybody that knew her personally knew that, but I mean, I had a situation with her when my father died. Literally an hour after I heard from my mother that my father had passed away, it was very suddenly, very young. She called me from Princeton and said, "Are you okay? Are you okay? Are you okay? I don't. I think something happened." And I was grateful to be able to talk to her while I was trying to process that. And that's the kind of thing that she had. So, but it would have been a bad thing basically for her reputation if people had known that.
Yes, and that is, this bias is still going on, but I mean, when I started to be drawn to this is because as a child I had several experiences with people already know because I mentioned it in other podcasts, but mostly it was precognition,
Uh,
psychometry, a lot of things that I didn't know what they were, and I thought they were paranormal somehow. And besides, I liked all the whole ghost culture and all that. So, but sometimes now that I'm exploring and I'm more opening to talk about other things besides the scientific parapsychology and be more open to the experiences I had and sharing some of them, um, it still feels like people are going to judge me.
yeah, exactly. And I mean, back in the day when I first went to go to the Rhine, I was 100%, for experimentation. And I loved reading all that stuff, all the apparition things and ghost books and all that kind of stuff. And I really enjoyed um, those kinds of articles in the Journal of Society of Psychical Research from London. But I wasn't. But the people around me, like Chuck Honorton and people like that, they were not interested in that kind of thing, and I think they shared. And I could be going way over the top here. I think they shared Dr. Rhine's idea that, and this was true of many, many psychologists at the time as well, that an experience is an anecdote and you can't get much out of it and it's not really useful and it's a waste of your time unless you can find a hypothesis that you can draw out of those experiences. And over the years since then, I think people have really have an understanding that you can't have the experiments if you don't have the experiences. And the experiences are our background and our context. It's around us now, and it's there in the back. The types of stuff that the SPR did with phantasms of the living and so on. So I think there's more understanding that you just can't have one without the other, and the experiences are very important. And how the person draws meaningfulness out of that is important. How when they get that kind of an experience, is there something specifically going on? Do they have a particular type of, they're in the Gansfeld, they always say the best people in the Gansfeld are artists and musicians and actors and people with a lot of creativity. So you don't see those kinds of things as much in the experimental area. So it's really important that these two areas are there. And I didn't really learn that until I met Carlos Alvarado, because he was 100% spontaneous. He read everything. He knew what everybody was doing in the experimental world, but his heart was in spontaneous experiences and the out of body and so on. So it took a while before I allowed myself to be educated, and then I feel like most of us came up that way. But there's still that sort of scientism rolling around in
Mhm.
the association, but overall, I think things have got a lot better.
Yeah, totally. And what do you see as the most robust findings in parapsychology that skeptics should take seriously?
Well, the Gansfeld for sure, because that's so much stuff. Remote viewing as well is very solid. I think it's more solid than people actually understand. But Carlos and I spent some time with John or McMonigal, because when we were in Charlottesville for working for Dr. Stevenson, Joe McMonigal and his wife lived very close by, and now she's the head of the Monroe Institute, which is also in that area. And you can't talk to him without feeling like there's more solidity to that those findings than most people think there is. And there's just a lot of things that I think we have way over the amount of evidence that any other discipline would be able to as my father would say, dine out on. That it was really substantive. And yet we still have that same problem where everybody says, you'll hear people on podcasts, in fact, who will say, well, they've never ever done anything. They don't have any evidence. They're just
Exactly.
sitting together and chatting and pretending this is real. Well, no, there's journals, and ask me, my husband had 300,000 items in his library and tons of journals, and
Oh,
it's taken me, I still have some to spread around. And it was like, we have so much stuff built up that's logical, that's well done. There are things that were not so well put together in terms of the methods or whatever, but every discipline has that. You grow as you learn, kind of thing. So I think those two things, and you can never get away from the experiences either, because it's not like suddenly it's 1980 and everybody knows science, so nobody has an out of body experience. And even if you're listening to this Swiss who say, oh well, we can manage that with messing around with your brain, well, it's not exactly, doesn't have the richness of a spontaneous out of body experience, or one from a person who's been training for years and years on how to manage this. So I think there's a lot of things in parapsychology that's solid, but my personal thing is remote view in Gansfeld, and I'm really interested in near death experiences, and not the out of body experience so much, although it's interesting when it turns out to be one, to have a little bit of
mm-hmm.
that, the other thing.
Yeah.
But I think there's a lot of stuff, and it's not just the experimental room, but the experiences. All of that's very important, and I think we've got a lot of support for those things. And I always tell people who cannot be, will not listen, that, but if we don't investigate all of these experiences and we don't investigate all these anomalies, we're also going to miss something about how our brain works, how our body works, and all that kind of stuff. So you want to throw that baby out with the bathwater? No, I don't think so. And then they kind of grumble, but it's. I think we have a lot of solid stuff there.
Yes, and that is something that people always argue, especially here in Latin America, because they don't have, at least in UK or in the States, there's the access in the same language, the journals, all
Yeah,
that. But here it's really hard. Even if I show them, okay, you can check this, you can review that. No, no, that can't be. And
yeah, that's it. Yeah, people come with an idea of what's happening, and they don't, they hide behind scientism. This like idea that we just have to say there's a method, that scientific method, and that proves that all of these weird things that I don't really believe in. Those are clear ideas that somebody else needs a little bit of a therapy for that. But sometimes people, like Bob John, for instance, he got interested in parapsychology because he was an engineer, professor of engineering, and he did a lot of really interesting stuff before he got interested in parapsychology. But he had a graduate student who was interested in psychokinesis, and so he said, okay, fine, we're going to put together some kind of an experiment, and then we'll see if we can get people to do what you want to do with this. They had like a disc or something that we're trying to move around, and she had positive results, and he had helped her design that, and analyze it, and take a look at, interpret the stuff. And then he was like, oh, you know and from that point on, he was really moving in in the direction of I am going to be doing this kind of stuff, and it lost him so much status in Princeton. His father had been a professor, and I think his grandfather too. I'm not sure, but when he passed away, Princeton refused to take his papers, including the papers that he did on all kinds of things for NASA and for other kinds of jobs that he had. They wouldn't take the papers. Period. They didn't want anything in the, and they wanted everybody out of the laboratory as soon as possible. And I think actually they got out of there earlier than that. When he was retiring, they made him move. And they had another place in Princeton. But then when it came for his, that's a guy whose papers should be in the archive at Princeton, and now it's in a castle in
Right.
in England because of somebody really cared about what they did. So it's just that kind of stuff never goes away. And I think when I was young, we all thought it would. And I am sure that Bob Morris's generation thought it would, and all the people before him thought we're going to get there, and it's going to be everybody's going to have a unit in every university on the planet, etc. So I
And
must
from uh-huh.
I must say that I don't know if you know Wellington Zangari in Brazil, but his
Yeah.
Spanish is perfect, and they have a lot of materials that are in Spanish, and quite a bit of Carlos's library that was in Spanish and Portuguese. They now have in their library, which is named after Carlos.
That's wonderful. Yeah, I don't know him personally, but I think I've
They're
seen his.
wonderful people. And all you have to do is say I sent you. So
Yes, to get more journals and articles, that would be great.
yeah.
So now that we were talking, okay, on the solid evidence, what have been like the greatest? I think the word sounds really bad, but like disappointment, or that you mentioned at the beginning, that some things you believe and then you get bombed. So, from that research, what would you consider that
I
people believe
um
and now then?
yeah, I don't know. I mean, there have been experiments that I was involved with that I thought was going to do better than it did, and was disappointed with that. And I feel like I think the only big thing that I feel bad about is that we're really still in that position where our the last generation were, when they got to their 60s and 70s. I think only Stanley Krippner is the most optimistic old person in the field. but
Mhm.
but it's like I think another part of it is that if you in order to really be in the field all the time, you have to figure out how to do that for yourself, because the jobs that are available that have parapsychology as part of it are very rare. Um, and it's very difficult to set up your own place and all that kind of stuff. And I give a lot of admiration to Mark Bacuzzi and Julie Beischel, because they've kept Windbridge going for decades now, and that's unusual. It's really tough to keep us going because of the reality that if you want to get married and have kids, you can't do this job necessarily, right? It's unusual for people to have a job that's stable enough that you can have a family. And people do it anyhow, but you find yourself becoming more of a business person than you wanted to be, and then trying to get the grants and all these kinds of things. So that's, I think, a sad thing that it hasn't made more inroads to other disciplines. But it certainly, I think, is better now than it was when I was 30 something. Just wandering around the Rhine. Um, so
Right. And let's talk a little, another question that usually, a question that I had before. Let's talk about education in parapsychology. As I said, it was really hard for me at the beginning. I was able to take the last course that Caroline Watt taught at
Ah,
Edinburgh, all
yeah,
the online.
she's wonderful.
Uh, yeah, she she is. But it was really hard, and some people believe that there are no serious places to study. And when I say no, there are many universities
Tons of
that
them.
have
Yeah.
departments and that they are doing research, and they go like, no. And I go like, yes. And I even mention some of them, but please, you know them better than I. And now the California Institute for Human Sciences
Yeah,
that
I am so excited about that. I mean, Jeff Mishlove, I'm very grateful for him that he talked to me about this, and they're working very hard to. That's an accredited place, and that program, which is not so big, is accredited along with that university. And that was the problem that we always had. Like Carlos and I were at Atlantic University in Virginia Beach, which is connected to the Edgar Casey Association of Research and Enlightenment. That school had accreditation, but it was national rather than regional. And in the United States, regional is the one that's okay. I mean, you're still accredited if you're with some of the other agencies that have been accepted by the Department of Education. God knows what's happening now, but and so we had that. We were actually hired to do a master's in parapsychology. They had a course, and they were doing a master's in transpersonal psychology, and that was why we were brought there. And it was very difficult to get it going. And the agency itself basically said, if we do this, we're going to lose our license and we have 150 other small universities and schools that we accredit, and they'd all lose their accreditation. And it was like, oh my God, and we had sent a 16-page proposal with over 300 pages of CVs of the people who were going to be teaching, many of
wow.
them who landed elsewhere. And nope, they didn't even read it. They just said, no, we can't do this. They're gonna take our a license away because somebody similar in their type of accreditation had allowed a professor to put a program on astrology there, which was actually more of a historical kind of a
Hmm.
thing, where you looked at the differences between astrology and astronomy, and how astrology was sort of the garden that astronomy grew out of. And they gave them the accreditation, and the Department of Education pulled their license, and they were closed in many of the schools that they had accredited it to. So there's a lot of negative stuff out there. And I had called up JFK. This was before National University merged with them. That's where Carlos got his master's in parapsychology. They still had the accreditation from the regional accreditor for that master's, but in the 80s, people wanted a consciousness and not parapsychology, so they just sort of changed the masters, but they still had permission, and that didn't make the our agency happy. It was like, okay,
Right.
never mind. So when I got became a professor at North Central University, and they merged a couple of years ago with National University in California. They also pulled in JFK, and that made me feel very happy because Carlos got his master's there, Lloyd got his master's there. Lots of people that I know did that in the late 70s. So this one, a California Institute of Human Sciences, is very unusual, but they already have a lot of wonderful parts of psychology that a lot of other schools don't touch. Not just a transpersonal psychology, but also integrative psychology and a whole bunch of other things. And it's a very lovely bunch of people. So I was really thrilled about that. And they have a bunch of good, they have a remote viewing course. They have the intro. There's a number of other kinds of things. And my history one, which is actually originally Carlos's, it goes from 1880 to 1940. So,
Wow.
so there's some things that you could do. I mean, it's like when you sit there and do the list, it's like there's Patrizio Trusoldi at Padua in Italy. There used to be several units there. The Cosolis ran one for years and years and years. And there's people in Australia. There's I think it's 16, 18 universities in SPR in Britain that either have either a unit or courses. So
Yes,
anyway,
there
it's been
are so many, and I mean, it makes me happy to see how.
and one of the
Uh,
things that Wellington Zangari does at University of Sao Paulo in the psychology department is he mentors doctoral students who are interested in parapsychology and interested in deception and it from the interested in the field from the skeptical side. He does the whole gamut there, and he's had a number of people that have come through there. Yeah, Everton Moralde was one of them.
mhm.
And now we've got Alexander Morera Almeida in Juiz de Fora, and they are very serious about the stuff that they do there too. So there are places. The problem is when you look at all the universities on the planet, there's hardly anybody,
Yeah,
and they're probably two continents away from where you're living. So it's still
yeah.
difficult. The
At,
online stuff is really, really
yeah,
wonderful.
at least we have that option now.
Yeah.
Um, so, for all of you, yeah, there are universities where you can study. There, as I said, there's a lot of internet courses. You just have to check who's the
Yeah.
teacher,
Who's teaching? Yeah.
who's teaching it, and if there's no name, because there are many, and that they are expensive and all that,
Yes, right.
and
That's the other.
you don't know who the teacher is, so
Yeah.
run from those and look
Yeah.
for.
Well, and that's why Carlos and I started Paramook too, which has always been free. I, as we've gone along, the Parapsychology Foundation have given us some money, but not that we don't do that anymore. We've got a very small Paramook coming up in December with Jim Matlock, who does reincarnation. He wrote the book Signs of Reincarnation, and KM Werenstein, I think that's the name. She's going to do two lectures, and then we're going to kind of in 2006. The idea is to get all the other people who said yes but couldn't come in December are getting together in May, and so we'll have another one on reincarnation. Brian Williams, who lives in Albuquerque, he runs the Psychical Research Foundation now with the widow of Jerry Conser, who had bought it from Bill Rollo, I think. And he's also working with Jerry Solfin on his theory about apparitions, which is really interesting. But he's the guy that took over after Carlos passed away. About a year later, I asked Brian if he would take over the curriculum and all that stuff, and I just moderate and try to get the videos back up on YouTube, which I'm really late on. So that's kind of exciting. But we wanted to have that out there, and at the time that we started in 2015, hardly anybody put up their videos, and now parapsychology is Parapsychology Foundation has a ton Some of them are really old from the 90s, but it's still kind of cool because you can see these people that are long gone and they're very funny and they talk about what they're interested in. And then there's Parapsychological Association does that, and yeah, IONS does it, Institute of Noetics, and it just there's tons of things now out there. And I have put on Parapsychology Online, that was our YouTube. I put 35 of Carlos's lectures, some of them in Spanish, up on YouTube, and people can go and take a look at all of that. And then he's got 4 interviews with Jeff Mishlov's New Thinking Aloud, which is a wonderfully broad kind
I
of.
love that. I love that show. Yes.
Yeah, honest to God, when Carlos passed, I spent probably 2 months, just sitting in the living room with the cats, watching his interviews over and over
Oh,
and over again, because it was just so quiet, and he was so wonderful. And now I get to, give them to my students and say, listen, this is important. We're going to talk about Eusapia Palladino, so you have to listen to this, kind of thing.
that is great.
Yeah. So
That
there's a
is
lot.
wonderful.
There's things are better than they used to be. I mean, when Carlos and I both started looking for books, I would go to the bookstore and give a list in my town, and that would take gazillions of months to get the books. He was writing at the age of 13, 14 to Samuel Weiser in a cult bookshop in New York City. I think now they're up in New England somewhere. And he was so important. He was so prolific, writing him and saying, I want this classic book from 1882. I want this. I want that. I want that. And they got a little tin box, and they put all of his asks in, all the things he wanted, one at a time, on an index thing. And when we went, he was back in the day, he was on the board of the American Society for Psychical Research. So we go to New York, and we go to Weiser, and he had gotten a letter in Durham that Weiser had gotten a couple of the books that he wanted, because he read French, Spanish, well, Spanish of course, French, Italian, and Portuguese, as well as English and Spanish. And we walked in the place, and he walked um, up to the guy behind the counter, and he said, "Hi, I'm Carlos Alvarado, and you have a book for me." And the guy went, "Oh my God, you're Alvarado! Oh my God!" And he got all the staff coming in, and everybody was shaking his hand, and bringing things that he had in his list and all this kind of stuff. And then at the end, and I was like pushed back to the door because we're both coming around, and I was like, "My God, what's going on here?" And then the guy said, as we were leaving, he said, "Oh, it's so wonderful meeting you. I thought you were some 90-year-old guy from Puerto Rico. I didn't realize that you were like us," kind of thing. And it was really wonderful. But he was literally building that library with classics in 5 different languages. So, and you had to sit and wait for it to show up. So now
Oh,
there's a lot of pluses now, even though there's still an awful lot of barriers that have to be, climbed over.
right. No, that's the whole idea of this kind of interviews,
Yeah,
and
exactly.
to get people interested. Some may like it, some may not. It doesn't matter. Just as I said, I'm not trying to convince anyone, but just look into the research.
That's
Okay,
it.
make your own decisions.
Yeah,
Research. There are the papers. If you believe that none of this can be okay, try and do a meta-analysis, a peer review, whatever,
yeah.
and then you
And
may make.
some people actually do those things and then are kind of like, oh,
Oops,
you know,
I thought
gee, there's something here. Yeah,
exactly.
yeah,
And we, I mean, I consider myself to be scientific. I like to approach this using the scientific method. I know the experiments are hard to do because of the um, of the I forgot the word, because everything just happens like in a moment. You can't foresee when a phenomenon is going to happen.
Yes,
Um,
exactly. Yeah.
but in any way, you can study the experience. I've like kind of focused lately in the personal experience, and it helps a lot. All these for example, the poltergeist cases with all the profiles that the Germans had,
Yeah.
the IGPP that they have structured. When I read that, if you don't know what I'm talking about, okay, there were some profiles about the people that cause certain types of poltergeist phenomenon
Yeah.
related either to depression or to mourning or
Yeah.
different neurotic. And I've used some of those within my some cases, and they make sense. So
Yeah.
they have a huge database of cases. So
Yep.
that's why everything is important.
Yeah, everything is important. All of the databases, all of the ways of looking at things. I mean, Walter von Lugano was
Mhm.
physicist, but he's a clinical. I don't know if he's a psychologist, but he's certainly been a counselor for a very long time and a therapist. And the kinds of things that he sees and the stuff that they've got amassed there is they're not that different from all the other ones, which is also
Mhm.
wonderful. That the same type of, when J, Louisa Rhine came back to the Rhine after the kids were in high school, she was Dr. Ryan asked her to start looking at and dealing with all of these experiences. And she basically classified them. She read them, she maybe wrote them a little bit, and then she classified them. Dr. Stevenson was 100% Society of Psychical Research methodology, which was almost like criminology. Okay, this is the person who saw the thing. Who did you talk to? I got to talk to that person, that kind of thing. Very, very detailed in the way that they built their cases. And yet the two ways of handling those databases were extremely important. And we would be lost if either one or the other method was not there. So I think everything that people think of to do and keep up over a period of time are really doing a huge positive thing for the field is, and especially if you figure out how to get it into an archive when you're
Yes.
95 and don't have room for it in your house, right? Because then somebody else can come along and look at all of that stuff. I knew Louisa Rhine maybe for I had met her a couple of times before I got there, but I was there for the last 3 months, I think, of her life. And she was very happy when somebody showed up, from another country who
Mm.
wanted to go through the database. She was very proud about it, and her book Invisible Picture is so good in terms of classification and so on. So, and what's over at the University of Virginia, that reincarnation database is still there and being worked on and added to and all this kind of stuff. So you never know where the breakthrough is going to come. So all of that
Right.
is useful. And
Yeah, I've heard that. I think it's Eric Dulan that is making the a great he has the macro PK uh,
ah
case like database that is,
uh-huh.
I think it's macropk.com,
Oh, interesting.
where
Oh,
everyone is like logging their cases.
oh, wonderful. I
I
didn't
think
know
it's,
that's what he was doing. That's terrific.
yeah, I saw that. I've dealt with many cases of poltergeist, and well, it's this psychokinesis for the ones that don't. It's related. Some other time we can talk about that. Um, so yes, there are a lot of people working on this,
Yes.
but that most of the regular population don't get to know. So
One, one,
um,
one of my students said last week, that she was great. She was grateful for all of the people in the 19th century and early 20th century who were taking risks with their reputations and their jobs and all that thing to begin all of this work. And I agree. I mean, I think what people go through to get these things done, it's just amazing. I mean, Ernesto Bozzano had so many things in his index. He would literally pull, if a book had 25 things, he would pull all of those out and give them a categorization and stick it in his database. And the Bozzoni de Boni library is still in Bologna, and there's 8 books up here on the top in Italian that are from Carlos's thing, and it's just all of these pieces are so important. That's one thing. If when I have friends or who have left the field or they don't, or they are feeling like they haven't contributed, nine out of 10, they absolutely have been contributing with what they were doing, what they were thinking, who they were talking to, where they went to school, what they ended doing with their interests. So I think I am grateful for all of those guys. You included. I was so excited
Oh,
when I
thank
when I
you.
saw you in one of the PAs. I think it was. I
The
don't remember what it was.
symposium. The
Yeah.
symposium.
Yes. Right. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I was. Yeah. Well, and Ramses was the minute he walked into the Paramook, he called me chief. So I figured, this guy's okay. But I was just delighted to see somebody coming from another Spanish place and having so much interest in industry, to do these kinds of things because it's really important. Louisa Ryan used to say, "Nope, it's not my 50. I already did my 50 years. No, it's somebody else's 50 years." And then, unfortunately, the other day, I think it was the guy, I think it's paranormal book. I don't know. His name is Richard Hatem, Hatem, and he has a podcast. And he said in his introduction that I had been in parapsychology for more than 50 years. And I was like, oh, no, they can't possibly. Oh,
Hold on.
it's, it's 53 years. Oh, dear.
Oh my goodness.
But that's lovely when there's people coming behind you with more technology, more understanding, and then all that energy. That's just the best thing in the world.
It is. And to be closing this interview, what advice would you give the young researchers interested in pursuing parapsychology?
Well, there are two things. One is the old school. Find the books that you want to read. If you have to buy them all in Kindle, who cares? Just get everything that you can get that you want to read, and build up your library in one way or the other. And the other thing is all of these various Vimo and YouTube especially, there is so much out there of the actual people who are doing the research talking about it. And there's lots of courses that have come and gone and lectures that have come and gone, and they're still there and available. And that's kind of a wonderful thing to put your feet up and just see what's going on. And sometimes I found a guy recently whose name is Keith Parsons. I've never heard of him before. I think his YouTube is instead of paranormal, it's Veranormal, and basically he must be connected to. I think he's connected to an kind of a ghost hunter kind of, because most of the stuff that he has there is electric, the voice stuff, but he has about six or seven videos that are spot on in terms of what he's talking about. He's reading all the journals, he's watching all the other stuff, and then when he puts it together into a lecture, it's just, you can't fault him in any way possible. I mean, he really knows his stuff, and there are a lot of people out there that are like that. So it's a question of checking them out and see what they're doing. but there's a lot of stuff out there that you can start with, and then look for people that are interested in this stuff. And if somebody's got a meeting around where you live, take a chance and see what they're up to. You never know where that angel is going to be to hit you on the head and say this is going to work for you. You don't know. You
Yeah.
have to get out there and explore. So
Yes, this is what we're trying to do here in Costa Rica. Well, we're doing. We've been doing it since 2021.
yeah,
The parapsychological groups and all that. The congress that we are going to have the next one in January. The
good.
Costa Rican International Congress of Anomalous Phenomena.
Oh, lovely.
Uh, it's the second.
Congratulations.
Yes, so we're doing moving step by step, but we're doing something. So if you're from Costa Rica or you're here, reach out. As and if you're in the US, you have all of you guys, lots of people, lots of groups and
Yeah,
organizations that you can join. And there's the online, well, the Paramook that is coming up, which
yep,
is a free online mini course, you can
yep,
say, right?
yes.
And yes, and there are many others coming. So, well, thank you, Nancy, for this time.
Oh,
It
you're
went.
welcome.
It's been an hour already, and I think we talk about half or less of the things that I wanted to talk about. But some other time,
Yeah.
we can address like a specific topic.
Yeah, and
I wanted
I'd
to.
like to apologize for my grandfather's chair because this is from 1920, and my grandfather was a very hefty guy. And every once in
Oh,
a while, I move out, and it's like, yeah.
I was wondering what was
Yeah,
the one. An EVP.
it's his desk as well, but that's nice and quiet. But the chair talks on its own, sort of.
Well, as I said, thank you so much for the interview,
You're
for
welcome.
coming here and telling us a little bit about your work. And to all of you people that stayed to the end, thank you so much. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And we'll see each other the next time. Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you, Isabella.